A couple of weeks ago, the BBC announced what looks like the beginning of the end for longwave. While this service will continue for some years yet, at least until 2017, there will be no more investment in the precious glass valves used to transmit the signal. So, when the last one blows, longwave will crash. Bad news for the estimated 90,000 people who only listen to Radio 4 on longwave. However, Radio 4 has assured us that between now and the longwave switch-off, homes will be found for the programmes that inhabit that frequency, such as the Daily Service and Yesterday in Parliament. But some listeners feel there is another vital longwave service that is being overlooked, dangerously so.
Hundreds of small boat sailors and sea anglers rely on the shipping forecasts, with general synopsis information, to predict the weather. Will these forecasts be repeated when longwave is discontinued? This could just be a life or death matter.
Delia Swift is one of those sailors.
Let me paint a picture for you. You're in a boat, you're in the North Sea, and you're surrounded as far as you can see by sea. Luckily, I know that I can switch on the radio no matter what happens, and I can listen into the shipping forecast and I can find out, is that hurricane going to hit me tonight?
There are warnings of gales in Viking, north at Sarah, south at Sarah.
And the UK outlook for the next 24 hours. A brisk run of southerly or southwesterly winds will affect most areas.
Expected northwest Fitzroy, 990 by same time.
If you're in the darkness without the shipping forecast on longwave, then it can be a very dark and very scary night. It's one of those lifelines that please, please, please just don't cut it off.
Well, I don't know if we can hold the BBC directly responsible for those in peril on the sea, but it's certainly something that the owners of smaller vessels will have to address when longwave is eventually switched off. Stuart Carruthers is the cruising manager at the Royal Yachting Association. He went into the BBC's Southampton studio, and I asked him, surely in 2011 there are other ways to get that vital information.
Well, yes, you're right. There's a variety of ways in which a mariner these days can get information. The problem with a lot of it, of course, is it relies on mobile and networks, and it's very, very patchy in a lot of areas still.
Can you give us some examples? Are you talking about very remote places, say off the coast of Scotland?
Well, the northwest Scotland, which is a very popular cruising ground, but even more closer to home, a sail from Southampton to Weymouth will take you into some black spots where you just can't get anything. And that is because you're sailing along coast where there's not a lot of population, or you're sailing under the cliffs, or you're sailing in the shadow of a mobile aerial.
And what about the FM signal?
Well, the FM signal, again, is limited in terms of its range, and the benefit about the longwave signal is that it travels a long distance to reach the mariner wherever he may be listening.
So what happens if the BBC says to you, well, actually, the valves are going to stop working, we can save a lot of money by getting rid of longwave, OK, we'll give you 5 years warning. What would you say to the BBC?
I would say, well, we need to talk about it in terms of what will replace the capability of how it's delivered. So,
and until you resolve that issue, are you saying the BBC shouldn't switch off longwave?
That would be our position, yeah. I mean, that's the crucial thing. It's how the weather forecast is delivered, and longwave is, at the moment, the most successful way of reaching mariners around the coast, wherever they may be.
So at the moment, longwave is absolutely vital for the weather forecast. But can you see a period of time, 3, 4, 5 years hence, when it won't be necessary?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I suppose there will be a period of time when it won't be necessary, and technology would deliver better cost-effective solutions for the mariner. That is already the case on commercial shipping, where they use international maritime satellite communications, but at the moment they are very expensive, use a lot of power, and are beyond the reach of most of the recreational community that the Royal Yachting Association represents.
How do they deal with this issue in other countries?
Well, other countries provide a mix of VHF, long wave, medium wave, internet-based services, as much the same as we in the UK do. My experience of sailing around the coasts of the continent is that the mobile network is far better established, so that weather forecasts by mobile means are far easier to come by.
Is it possible to estimate how many people will be affected by this? Who could be put at risk, if you like, sailing around our shores if the longwave was taken away?
Throughout the year, there are a large number of coastal mariners who are going to sea in small craft, predominantly fishermen. It would be difficult for me to put an estimate on the numbers, but I would think that in terms of offshore recreational boating, we're talking in excess of 100,000 vessels, and the fishing industry, of course, brings very many more to that number.
Stuart Carruthers, and the BBC has told us that it is maintaining an ongoing dialogue with maritime organisations. Now, fans of the shipping forecast are to be found as much on land as on sea, and they've heard some disturbing rumours that Radio 4 is preparing to drop it from the schedules. This concern has been triggered by the BBC asking members of the Royal Yachting Association, the national governing body for boating, how they get their information about the weather when they're at sea. That, some are suggesting, is a ruse, so that if the answer comes back with a resounding, off the internet of course, Radio 4 will stop broadcasting the shipping forecast. Is there any truth in those rumours? That's a question I put to Dennis Nolan, Network Manager for Radio 4.
Absolutely not, Roger. I can assure you and any listeners who might have concerns about its future that it's perfectly safe in the hands of Radio 4.
So why are you consulting with the Royal Yachting Association?
We consult our listeners in all sorts of ways all the time about their views of Radio 4 programmes. And this is an opportunity to actually consult the very listeners who listen with most attention to the shipping forecast, because they are the leisure sailors, the dinghy users, the mariners who actually use this information for practical purposes before going out to sea or even while at sea.
Now, supposing they tell you that actually they don't use the shipping forecast very much, they love it, they like to listen to it, but really they get their information off the internet. What would you do then?
I am confident that there is still a very large number of people who use the shipping forecast for practical purposes. I'm assured of that by the yachting and other marine organisations, and I'm confident that that's the case. So what I expect to get from this survey is a bit of focused feedback from listeners as to the quality of the information that's provided, and there may indeed be ways in which we can incorporate some of their feedback into our service.
That's the short term then. Let's look at the long term. You've told us in past programmes that long wave will be no more. The time scale, perhaps not for 10 years, perhaps slightly less. But anyway, its time is definitely limited on this earth. What would then happen, of course, to the shipping forecast, which is on long wave?
Oh, it's too early to speculate about that, Roger. That's a long way off. By
a long way, more than 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, what do you think?
I'm not going to put a figure on it, Roger. But well into the next charter period.
So those of us who find it easy to go to sleep with the shipping forecast, which lulls us with beautiful sounding names of all around the coast of England, our sleep will be uninterrupted in future.
I can assure those who love the shipping forecast, either for scientific and marine safety purposes or for its unique poetic cadence, that its future is very safe.
Now, what do the bands Radiohead and Jethro Tull and the poets Seamus Heaney and Caroline Duffy have in common? Well, of course, they're all devoted feedback listeners. Actually, I don't know if that's true, but they are all devotees of the shipping forecast.
The area forecast for the next 24 hours. Viking, north at Sierra. Westerly or southwesterly 4 or 5, increasing 6 or 7 later.
Earlier this week, Radio 4 broadcast Shipping Songs, presented by folk singer Lisa Knapp. It's a paean of praise to the natural rhythms and poetic recitation of the broadcasting institution, which has inspired songs, poems and books, including one by author Charlie Connolly. Despite writing it 10 years ago, Charlie is still getting emails and exchanges from folk who want to share their love of the shipping forecast. We've also been hearing lots of lovely recollections from listeners. Here is Charlie's ode to all of them.
Cromarty, Fourth Tyne, Dogger. Southwest 3 or 4, occasionally 5 later, except...
A few years ago, I travelled round the 31 shipping forecast sea areas, published my adventures, and nothing has been the same since. Despite having no direct connection to the sea, I grew up fascinated, soothed, mystified, and occasionally alarmed by the shipping forecast. It soon became clear that I wasn't alone. I've received hundreds of emails and letters from people all over the world, from Vancouver to Auckland, Falmouth to Aberdeen, all sharing with me their deep love of the shipping forecast. And this week, following Lisa Knapp's programme, Radio 4 listeners have been showing their affection for this broadcasting institution.
White, Portland, Plymouth. East or northeast 5 or 6.
Hello, I'm Andrew White. I'm a writer and a filmmaker, and it's inspired a love affair with the sea. And now in my work, I write and film the sea very often, which, coming from landlocked Doncaster, is a bit strange.
My name is Nikki Clark, and I live in Berwick-upon-Tweed in Northumberland. Ronald Byng, who wrote Sailing By, he wrote a couple of beautiful pieces for the oboe, and I play the oboe keenly but badly, and playing it gives me images of being out at sea.
All kinds of people have contacted me. Waiters, ex-lighthouse keepers, teenagers, yachties, nonagenarians, accountants, at least one admiral, and even a beefeater. I once received on the same day emails from a retired merchant seaman and New Order's Bernard Sumner, both expressing an identical affection for the shipping forecast. The reasons for this mutual meteorological affection were many. A cruise ship captain once told me that whenever he first picked up the forecast out in the Atlantic, it confirmed he was on his way home. Angela in Cambridgeshire wrote, "I love the fact it's incomprehensible to most people, like a secret club for those who understand it." While Guy from Carlisle hailed the rhythm of the broadcast. It's like the chorus of a song over and over again as each area goes by. Others have expressed similar sentiments this week.
So let's move here to the weather forecast for the inshore waters of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Hello, my name is Molly. I'm from Woking in Surrey. My memory of the shipping forecast is being a very small child, sitting with my mum, waiting for Listen with Mother to start. I said, I need to listen to Cromarty German Bight. I could recite the whole thing, the North of Sierra, South of Sierra, but Cromarty and German Bight were my favourite ones. I had to go onto YouTube this afternoon just to listen, and I could almost feel the blue velvet of the sofa while I was listening. It took me back.
Hi, my name's Karen Hudson. I used to think it was a bit of a fail when I was still up feeding when the shipping forecast was on. And I found myself thinking about all the ships and boats out there, listening along with me and wondering where they all were. Were they north at Sierra, south at Sierra, Fastnet? Now when I hear it, I think back to all those hours in the dock, and it was just my babies and me, wondering if my chances of going back to bed were good, moderate, or extremely poor.
The shipping forecast, which last year celebrated its 90th birthday in the form we recognise today, is like a national secular prayer. It's an ode in free verse to the people of the sea and their well-being, and is the best reminder we have that we're an island nation and a maritime people. The forecast recognises no borders and no politics. It stands up for all of us against the elements. It's easy to become carried away by the romance of the shipping forecast, and important to remember that it saves lives, countless thousands over the years. Yet it is unquestionably bound into our collective consciousness. Stop anyone in the street and I guarantee they'll be able to name at least half a dozen sea areas, even if they're not sure why. 2 of them, incidentally, will be Dogger and Fisher. It's always Dogger and Fisher.